What is going on, everyone? Welcome to Therapy on Two Wheels. Today we're going to be talking about whether or not the BMW F800R is a good beginner bike. Let's jump into it. So before I dive into all the details, the first thing that I'm going to say is, do I think this is a good beginner bike? For the most part, no, it is not. And I'll tell you several of those reasons here. The first one being that this has 90 horsepower. I would never recommend a 90 horsepower bike to somebody that is just starting out riding. Now, there might be some small exceptions. Maybe if it's a person that was riding dirt bikes their whole life growing up, they've ridden plenty of 450 dirt bikes, they understand the power, they understand the kind of twitchiness of a torquey bike, then yes, maybe if they're an older individual, if they're a little bit more mature and they understand that they're not going to whiskey throttle it as soon as they get on the bike, then yes, this could possibly be something that somebody starts out on and definitely grows into. And this is one of those size bikes, as well as the amount of power that's in this bike, that you don't need more than that. Unless you're 6'10", you are not going to need a taller bike than this. And realistically, for street use, you don't need more than 90 horsepower. This bike tops out at about 130, 140 miles an hour, just depending on weight and conditions. You don't need more than that. You can go 80 miles per hour in second gear on this bike, which is why I cruise most of the time on these back roads at 35, 40, 50 miles per hour. I just keep it in second gear the whole time. It's really comfortable. It doesn't have a lot of vibiness. But if you are an experienced off-roader and you're looking to go into your first street bike, then yes, maybe that's the exception of where this could be your first street bike that you are legally riding. Now, if you are a brand new rider, you've never ridden dirt bikes, you've never ridden anything on the road, you haven't even ridden a scooter, I would not suggest this bike for a newer rider. This has way too much power. It does have a little bit twitchier throttle, especially compared to something that's lower powered, like a Ninja 300 or even some of the newer 400s. Those have manageable power and a much longer power band for somebody to not get themselves in trouble by throttling way too quickly, accidentally, especially if you're doing it coming out of a turn like this. If you're not used to slowly rolling on and off the throttle, you should not have a bike with this much power. You want to start on something that's a 250, 300, maybe even going up to a 400cc. Most of those bikes are going to be sub 50 horsepower. They'll have plenty of speed to get you up to freeway speeds going 70, 80 miles per hour, no problem. Depending on your little 250, if you have like a Honda Rebel 250, you're going to be maxed out around probably 80 miles per hour. And that's if you're a smaller, lighter rider. But for just starting out, you should spend those probably first at least 3 months, maybe up to 6 months, just getting to learn the ergonomics of riding. You're going to have a while where you have to think about everything that you're doing. You have to think about, okay, I got to reach for the rear brake or the front brake on my right hand side. I got to reach for the clutch on my left. My rear brake is going to be my right foot. My shifter is going to be my left foot. And sometimes you have to do all of those things in conjunction with each other, and your brain just has not had enough time or practice to conceptualize what you need to do at what order. And that's if you're expecting it and you're anticipating and planning that you're going to do those things. When something pops out at you on this road, if I had some type of animal, or maybe I'm coming up around this turn and the car on the other side is halfway into my lane, I can't take 2 or 3 seconds to think about, okay, do I need to use my front brake or rear brake? Should I downshift? Should I pull in my clutch? Should I just lean the bike as much as I can? Those are not things where you have time to think about that in those emergency situations. So until you become comfortable with riding the bike just in general, you should not be hopping on something like this with this much horsepower. For me, I've been riding for a little over 3 years. I'm to the point now where I really don't have to think about my shifting, my braking, how far do I need to have for my lean angle going into a turn, how much speed do I need to scrub off, how fast can I accelerate outside of a turn at the end of it. All of those things should already be kind of preset in your mind and ingrained in your mind before you hop on something with higher power. So ring out the throttle on a Ninja 300. It's going to top out probably around 100, 110 maybe if it's a newer one. For the 400s will go up to like 120. But you do not want to have issues. We're trying to think about what you're going to do at any point in time while you're riding a bike, when you're on a higher powered bike, because they're so much more dangerous, because you can go a lot faster, a lot quicker. You do have much more braking power, so maybe you get a bike that doesn't have ABS. You have to understand how to progressively squeeze on the brake lever before you hop on a bike that doesn't have ABS and you're bombing down the street going 100 miles per hour. If you lock up those brakes, you're likely going to high side it, or at the very minimum, if you're not used to leaning far over on a bike and you're going around a curve at 70 miles an hour, and that curve is only supposed to be 30, you're probably going to low side, because you're going to be unexpectedly surprised at how wide you're going to start going at that 70 miles per hour. It's just not a comfortable feeling being on a bike with this much power when you've never ridden on the street before, and especially if you've never ridden a motorcycle in general. There's so many things that you have to think about, but the last thing you want to think about is, does this bike have too much power for me? So for me, I'd say up until probably about a year ago, I would not have hopped on a bike with this much power. But I've ridden enough bikes now, I've ridden enough roads, been through long trips, I've ridden through rain, I've ridden through dust storms, I've ridden through thunderstorms, high winds, I've ridden through a lot of different conditions, a lot of different types of roads. I'm very comfortable on pretty much any scenario that I put myself at this point. And for a road like this, I've been on this road probably at least 10 times, so I generally know what's coming up next. I know if there's any surprising turns where maybe there's no signs that tell you to slow down or tell you a general speed limit. Like these ones coming up are 25. I know these roads I can comfortably go 30 to 35 with no problem on a bike. And you have to keep in mind there's going to be a little discrepancy usually between the speedometer on the bike and how fast you're actually going. But for this, 30 miles per hour, easily flickable through these corners. I can probably go a little bit faster. But again, because I'm talking during this and I'm not putting my 100% attention into my ride, I'm not going to be bombing around these corners going 60 miles an hour, even though I probably could. And I definitely know this bike could do that. I'm not going to do it just because it's not safe. And that's one of the things that you have to think about as a newer rider, is the excitement level and the fun factor of riding a motorcycle combined with the safety factor. You are much more likely to get into an accident, as well as just drop your bike in general when you're a newer rider, because there's so many other things that you have to focus on. Because as a newer rider, you don't understand that in the road, I'm looking for road hazards. I'm looking, is there any rocks? Is there any gravel? Is there anything in this road that's going to potentially cause me issues where my tires might slip on it? Or is there a piece of wood in the road that I'm gonna have to quickly, stand up on my motorcycle? And I can see here, I know this is a tight turn, so I'm slowing down a little bit more. You also have to look for inconsistencies in the road itself. Something like this, you're gonna have a road where there could be a huge slant, and you don't really see that because on here you have these trees and shrubs that cause the shadowing. See, like right there was a great example where that road just dipped off. It looks like it's almost sinking in. And especially if you're riding at night, or again, if this is the first time on this road, you're not familiar with where these things are at, and it can put you in a sticky situation. If you're going too fast on your bike because it's fun and it's exciting, you're just putting yourself in dangerous positions, and you're likely going to wreck your bike and potentially hurt or kill yourself just because you're on a bike that has too much power for you. The other things that you have to look out for, you're looking out for other cars coming around the corner here. I need to know if somebody is too far over into this lane, can I quickly shift my bike and get it over into the middle of the lane? Would I be able to brake while I'm going through that turn? All of these things you need to practice before you get into those real life situations. So I'm a big advocate for, especially when you get a newer bike, go do some practice runs with it. Go do your figure eights, do your emergency braking, do some examples of standing up on your pegs because there's something in the road and you don't want to get bucked off your seat when you go over it. Practice all of those things before you take it out into the streets where the level of potential threats are much, much higher. When you're in those environments, especially during like an MSF course, those are very structured environments where there's no other cars around you. There's typically no obstacles unless that's part of one of the drills that you're going through. It's a very manageable situation that you're usually not going more than 20 to 25 miles per hour throughout the whole course for the most part. And you're not going over second gear. Remember, this bike in second gear can go up to 80 miles per hour. I can almost guarantee that none of the bikes in that MSF course are going to come anywhere close to that. In second gear, they're probably topping out at about 40 or 50 miles per hour, and that's what you're used to. So take your time, get a bike, go on OfferUp, Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, one of those, buy yourself a $2,000 to $3,000 beginner bike that has somewhere between 250 and maybe 500 cc's. I would generally stick to something that's less than 50 horsepower and learn on that bike first. Get comfortable with it. Be able to wring out the throttle around turns like this on a 300cc bike, because right now I maybe have the bike a quarter of the way in with the throttle. It's not any close to as far back, and this is probably as much power as you're going to get on a 300cc motorcycle. So get familiar with those lower speeds, get comfortable with the maneuverability of a bike, all the different controls, the emergency situations that you're going to be in. And once you're comfortable with that, that's your indicator that it's time to now move up to a little bit higher bike. But for most people, that's going to be at least a minimum of 3 months before you feel comfortable with the controls. And that's if you're riding daily. If you're only going out and riding on the weekends, it's probably going to take you close to a year to feel 100% comfortable on your bike and comfortable in a lot of different situations. If you're riding as a daily commuter and you're out on your bike every single day, that's probably going to be a little bit quicker, maybe that 3 to 6 month range before you feel like, okay, now I can step up to something bigger. But start out on those smaller bikes. Pay $2,000 to $3,000 for it. Make sure it's a used bike. You don't want to go out and buy a new bike for your first bike, because you're probably going to drop it. And when you drop that bike, that value goes down significantly. But you're just going to have to know that for you, you have to manage the level of excitement and fun with safety for yourself. Now with the BMW F800R specifically, you are going to have quite a bit of creature comforts in this bike. You're going to have your heated grips, you're going to have the ABS, you have your automatic stability control, there's a lot of things, your automatic suspension. There's a lot of things on this bike that are very nice to have as a newer rider, but again, the biggest factor comes down to how much power does the bike have and what do you actually need. I mean, if you're staying within a city for the most part, and you're probably not going above 50, 60 miles per hour, because maybe you don't do any freeway or highway rides, it's just commuting back and forth to work through the city, why would you get a bike like this if you're not going to be going at speeds higher than 50 to 60 miles per hour? You know, that just generally does not make sense. You're going to want something that is more economical in terms of fuel, which is going to be your lower cc bikes. I mean, if you're not going over 50 to 60 miles per hour, you can probably get away with a 125 as well. Get something that has over 100 miles per gallon. You know, it's going to be fairly easy to maneuver. It's really light as well. So if you're in somewhere that has lane filtering or lane splitting like in California, then it's very, very easy to be able to go in between those cars. The bigger, more powerful bike that you have, the more difficult that's going to make it. So it really depends on your situation, what you're going to be using the bike for, how long, if at all, that you've been riding before this, and also what is your maturity level. If you're 18, 19, 20 years old, I definitely would not recommend a bike like this, because you're probably going to want to use all 90 horsepower every single place that you go. You know, for me, I'm 35 years old. I'm glad I got into motorcycling when I was 32, because my maturity level was much, much higher, and I don't feel that need to bomb down the freeway going 130, because for me it's not worth it. The risk is not worth the reward of going at those speeds and potentially killing myself by getting into an accident or getting some speed wobbles and getting thrown off my bike. So there's a lot of factors that go into to determine if you should be on a bike like this for your first bike. I'd say for the majority of people, you should look at a much smaller, lower cc bike, a lot less horsepower, and then work your way up to something like this. This would be a great second bike to have. Start out on your 250, your 300, then go start looking at these bikes after 3 months, 6 months, when you get comfortable at going at those higher speeds, and you can go at much lower lean angles as well. Then start looking at those more powerful bikes, because yes, they are going to be fun and you can keep them for a very long time. You're never going to get bored of a bike like this. Maybe if you take your bike to the track, then yes, you might want something with a little bit more horsepower, because you can go 140, 150 miles an hour on the track. You're not going to be doing that anywhere on the streets besides maybe the freeway, and depending on where you live, it's definitely not in Southern California because there's traffic at all time of the night and day. But if you live somewhere that has very open roads, yeah, you might be able to go 150 on it. But why would you want to do that when you can just go to a track and have a lot more fun at those types of speeds? Now for me, you can see a lot of these trucks and a lot of these cars are going over these lines as well. So my comfortability level is staying a little bit more on the outside, because I know that people suck at driving and they're not going to stay in their lane. So I have to defend myself, and if I'm not comfortable with my bike to be able to maneuver it quickly to get out of the way, then I definitely do not want something that has this much horsepower. So would I say that this is a good beginner bike overall? Generally no, unless you're an experienced off-roader, or maybe you had ridden before and took 10 years off, 20 years off, and now you're coming back into motorcycling. Yeah, maybe you can jump on something like this. But if you're brand new to motorcycling, especially for riding on the street, I would not suggest something like the BMW F800R as your first bike. As a second bike, it would be fantastic, and this is going to give you a lot of fun, a lot of excitement, and you can keep this bike for a very long time, and these engines will run for a very long time as well. A lot of torque. That's going to have a lot of fun in these twisty roads, especially in the lower gears with the higher RPMs. But overall, hope you enjoyed the video. Like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you all in the next one.